What's going on, guys? Pegasus and the Wise Guys. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you sub, make sure you hit the bell, guys. Terralaments has once again got support, and it's time that we talk about it. Let's talk about it. This support here in this video, in my opinion, inside of Darkwing Blast is 100% going to allow Teralament to equal up to Splight. And with that being said, let's get into these news cards. The first new card I want to talk about is Terralaments Lulucaros. Lulucaros is a level 8 fusion water monster and aqua monster with 3,000 attack and 2,500 defense. And it says your other monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, which is crazy because if you have two of these, don't you already have a marauding captain lock? Let's get back to the point. Far more than being a marauding captain lock style of card if you can get two of them onto the field, which might not happen as much because it takes a Kid Kalos as well as another Teralaments monster. I definitely think that being able to essentially stop your opponent from being able to special summon a monster as a quick effect and then be able to negate the activation as well and then destroy it, basically equaling a Gamma on legs in a sense, as well as also being able to replace itself just in case, to be able to bring it back onto the field and then further set up that marauding captain style lock at the end of it. If you could get two of them on the field, I think that's pretty good, guys. Not the most broken card I've ever seen, but definitely a really strong boss monster for a really significant archetype. The next card to talk about is Teralament's Grief, which states special summon one Teralaments monster or one VSAS Starfrost from your deck or graveyard. Insane. And if you do, send one monster you control with the same type or attribute to the grave. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target one of your banished Teralament traps and add it to your hand. You can only use one Teralament's Grief effect once per turn, and only once that turn. Make sure you understand that. Personally think this is a little bit of a crazy card, but we're going to come back and touch on each of these cards specifically and see what we really think about them. Let's get into the next card. The next card is Taralam and Heartbeats, and this card specifically says target one spell or trap on the field, shuffle it into the deck, then send one card from your hand to the graveyard. If you control VSAS Starfrost at activation, you can target two spell or traps instead. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target one Teralament's trap in your graveyard and add it to your hand. You can only use one Teralament Heartbeats effect per turn, and only once that turn. Finally, I wanted to talk about Teralament Screen, which really looks like a really cool card, and this card specifically states that if a monster or monsters is special summoned or normal summon and you control a Teralaments monster or VSAS equals Starfrost, you can send the top three cards of your deck to the grave. Also, all face-up monster your opponent controls lose 500 attack. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add one Teralaments trap from your deck to your hand. So basically, guys, what I see in all of these cards is that they're trying to have an ability to cycle all of the trap cards, and I really don't feel like that's all that necessary, but let's talk about the necessary point. Teralament essentially is a deck that's basically another one card starter type of deck, because essentially even having Rhino Heart by itself can equal an entire board in and of itself without even getting into what you would mill, what you have in your hand, etc., etc. Not to mention some of the other stuff that add to the versatility, like the Lightsworn archetype being able to be splashed in, Shadal's being able to be splashed in, the Earth Fairy stuff with the Ishizu support with like Ajido and all those other cards. I think Branded Opening and Despia obviously being able to still be mixed with this deck if it's still hanging around and hasn't been all the way power crept. I feel like you're just going to be forced into playing Teralament and it's not going to mix that heavily with Despia, so I feel like a lot of these decks are just going to get bumped. So the first point I wanted to talk about is that a lot of these new archetypes are going to bump the old ones, i.e. Sword Soul. I think with this new support, I 100% believe that a transition has happened where basically Splight went from undeniably tier 0 to now there's two decks that are very, very good, 0.5 to say the least, maybe tier 0. They're both tier 0. So now that they're both going head to head, you pretty much got like a 2-deck format with some other decks kind of being mixed in there, as you see from this chart. Besides some of the lore that I've been reading up on, basically saying that Albat's got his ass kicked by Aluber, I wanted to talk about some of the other cards that are going to help you kick other people's ass. See what I did there? Let's get into that. I feel that Abyss Dweller inside of a mirror match is going to be absolutely insane. And Dweller is actually going to be a little bit bigger this time because Rhino Heart is a main deck card, is a water monster, and can 100% make a very powerful, devastating blowout card versus your opponent. Meaning you're already going to be interacting with your opponent on another wavelength of, hey, I can lock you out with an Abyss Dweller. The additional cards that everybody already knows about, like Shark and Toad being able to be mixed into the deck. I think Beatrice and Baron, V-Size Starfrost, obviously mixing into this archetype because, well, it's on every damn card anyway. And then last but not least, the fact that Starfrost, the Earth Fairies, and much, much more can basically just take this deck to a whole nother level. Now, obviously, there are some other issues. Barrier definitely hurts, but I do like that this deck can pivot out of being able to fuse. If you get locked out of fusing, say they dimensional barrier, call fusion, you can still play in a different sense, so to speak. Obviously, cards like Silent Graveyard, cards like Ghost Spell that interact specifically with stuff being able to be moved around, as well as stuff like Meister. I just feel like all of these things are things that you're going to have to kind of be ready for, kind of marinate on. But as far as these new cards and being able to mix into the trap stuff, I really like it. So in short, if I were wrapping these up, guys, I feel that Grief is basically fusion deployment, which we'll see how it actually ends up coming out and how it's used. The fusion is really, really good, and it's going to add to nutty inboards. Heartbeats is an insane card, but I just don't know how good Starfrost can actually be in the deck. And Scream is also a really, really good card, but I just don't know how much you need to mill on top of milling. But with that being said, guys, I appreciate you for tuning in. Let me know what you think about these new cards adding to this wonderful archetype that I will 100% be playing, and I'll see you next time. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Pegasus signing out. Arrivederci.